So we want to discuss today whether Steve Sarkisian is the best recruiter slash developer that Texas has had, honestly, in the history of its program. Interpret that whatever way you want. I will say I only went back to Mac Brown because they started the 7th round draft era around that time. It's kind of hard to tell the difference when someone has 20 rounds to choose players, whereas 7. So that's a big difference. So I'll let you start first, Gerald. Do you believe he is the best we have had?
It's such a tough moment because you don't want to like fall into the recency bias thing, right? Where you don't want to fall into the, Texas just had its most successful draft class in the 7-round era, and Sark has had more in the last 2 drafts than they had in the 10 years prior, right? So like there's a lot of evidence that's bouncing up recently that shows that Texas is doing a really good job of recruiting and developing players, right? I think the cat like the tension I have to manage here when you talk about it is like, Mac Brown had a lot of players drafted and recruited. I don't think they never had 12. I don't think. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, right? That's the record. And I think part of the Mac Brown era at Texas was a lot of the guys that he had drafted were those guys that are the can't miss kind of guys, where they came to campus already really good, got better. Like I'm not saying Vince Young didn't get better while at Texas, right? Or Michael Huff or Aaron Ross, those kind of guys. They came to Texas and got better, but I think on a position by position basis, kind of across the board, as somebody who's been following Texas football now for 26 years, right, more than a quarter of a century, I've not seen the breadth of development, right, where Texas was DBU for a long time. It had a lot of guys drafted and the defensive back unit. Texas had a lot of defensive tackles drafted, but the skill players were hit or miss. And now Texas has had a routine level of these of consistency across the board. We're seeing a smattering of offensive linemen, defensive linemen, skill guys. Quarterback is notwithstanding, right? Quarterback probably still something out there, but I think from a breadth of recruiting, we haven't seen this in modernity. I don't think.
No, I would agree with that. So I actually have this charted. So Mac Brown at 16 years at Texas had 64 draft picks total, including 16 first round picks. So that's a lot. And then Charlie Strong had, obviously not great here. He had 6 draft picks in 3 years, so about 2 a year. He did have 1 first round pick. And then Tom Herman actually surprised me because, like, on average, he's getting 4 guys drafted, basically. He had 15 draft picks in 4 years, but he had 0 first round picks. And I think that was our biggest thing with Tom Herman. When we got the 5-star guy, he didn't end up being a first round pick. If we got the 4-star guy, he didn't end up being a first round pick. Basically, he took you from high school and he really didn't get much better because, listen, let's face it, guys, these guys straight out of high school, if you just sit them down and have them go to practice on their own for 3 years and they were a 5-star recruit, they probably would have ended up getting drafted anyway. So that's kind of the issue with Tom Herman. And then Steve Sarkisian, 6 first-round draft picks and 28 draft picks overall. So, yeah, he's doing something that really nobody has done. Like, if he continues this pace, Steve Sarkisian will have just as many first-round draft picks probably in 3 years as Mac Brown did in 16 years. If he continues this pace, he's going to have as many guys drafted. He's at 28. Mac Brown was at 64 in 16 years. At probably 7 to 8 years, he's probably going to be at that 64 number. So he's doing something Texas has not seen ever. Like, I think he is the best developer slash recruiter. I will say this. Obviously, NIL does help that. It does. You can't just say, hey, listen, he's the best. But I do think even without NIL, he would have ended up one of the 3 best, because wherever he was at, that's what people talk about. He's a really good developer. He's really good at building connections. You heard that at Alabama. Bryce Young is someone that got recruited by Steve Sarkisian. He said that at Southern Cal, he was really good at that as well. They had good recruiting classes in this before NIL. So he still would have been really good in my opinion, but NIL has definitely enhanced Steve Sarkisian as well.
Yeah, and I think, I've said this before on our live streams, is that like the guys that Texas was recruiting, they're going to get paid wherever. And so I think the differentiator that Sark has seen in this era is honestly like focusing more on the development. He's got coaches that are known as teachers, coaches that have NFL pedigrees. They just brought in Dwayne Aquina, who's one of the best teachers of technique in the secondary that we've seen in probably 30 or 40 years in college football, right? So like Steve Sarkisian, I think, is prioritizing developing these players because he knows that if they go to Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, USC, wherever, they're going to get paid, right? These 5-star guys are going to get their bag wherever they go. So Steve Sarkisian's pitch to them is, you can get paid at Texas, and we've got the guys that are going to get you NFL paid, right? You can get college paid. We're going to get you NFL paid, right? We're going to get you there in the league, and you're going to get to a second contract. You're going to be a guy who they prioritize as wherever you are in the draft, right? So I think that to me is the differentiator for Texas right now is that, Steve Sarkisian has prioritized building a staff of teachers, building a staff of guys who are going to and have pedigrees of getting guys in the league, right? Kyle Flood gets guys in the league. Dwayne Aquina gets guys in the league. Sark himself gets guys in the league. The other coaches have Chris Jackson, NFL guy, right? Defensive line coach, NFL guy, right? So you're seeing there's a pattern of we're going to get you to the league because you're going to get paid wherever. You're going to get paid wherever you go. So we're going to prioritize bringing on coaches that are going to teach you skills. They're going to teach you how to be a professional, and they're going to get you to the league because that's really where these guys are going to go because they're going to get their bag wherever.
No, that's very true. And I hear people, and I've seen, there was actually an article written when doing my research. I forget who wrote it, but they basically said, how much credit do we have to give Tom Herman? Because 12, I believe, of the 28 draft picks are from Tom Herman to Steve Sarkisian. I would say very little because of what my point was early on Tom Herman. He didn't develop. So why can't I give him credit for people he brought in the program? Yeah, he brought him in, but let's be honest here. A lot of these guys probably weren't going to get drafted or drafted a lot lower if they were under Tom Herman than when they were under Steve Sarkisian. Guys like Moro Ojimo honestly wasn't really going to get drafted. He wasn't even on any draft radar. Got drafted in the 7th round. Yeah, it's a low draft pick, but he still got drafted compared to probably being undrafted under Tom Herman. Keandre Coburn, I think, is the best example of that. That's a guy no one really, he was honestly a disappointment under Tom Herman. Then Sark came in, and I believe he ended up being a 5th round pick, and he's still playing in the NFL cashing checks. So guys like that, you have to give a lot of credit to. And another point on that, there are guys that got drafted under Tom Herman that have played great in the NFL. When they got away from Texas, they played much better. I as a Broncos fan, have experienced this personally. I saw Kane Stearns when we drafted him. I was like, I don't really know. He came in, he was great right away. And we've continued to see his progress in the NFL. Guys like Brandon Jones, I know he's a Charlie Strong guy, but he also was under Tom Herman for a little bit, came in 3rd round pick, and he's played much better. Again, also on the Broncos. Poona Ford, I think, might be the best example of that. A guy I believe he either was 7th or undrafted, and he has been phenomenal, and he's going to have a long career in the NFL. So I think Sark, developing wise, I think he is the best. I think that is his calling card. Recruiter, it's hard to tell, like we said with the NIL, but overall, developing wise, I definitely think even without NIL, I think he would have been the best.
Yeah, and I will say, I don't think you have to give Tom Herman a ton of credit, but one of the things that Tom Herman was able to do was able to stockpile skill talent, right? He was able to get a lot of skilled players on campus, and I have my own, frustrations with Herb Hand and how they handled the offensive line under Tom Herman. I could do a whole live stream about just that, right? But ultimately, some of those skill guys get here because of what Tom Herman was able to do. Some of the early skill guys in this class, right? Bijan Robinson, early skill guy for Steve Sarkisian, broke the Texas running back streak, right? Those are guys that Tom Herman got to campus. Now, Tom Herman has a reputation for being kind of a jerk, so folks didn't stay around long. Folks didn't want to be here. So there's a lot of other subtext that happens with the Tom Herman conversation. Tom Herman gets some credit for being a really great skill player recruiter, wasn't great at recruiting in the trenches. That's the first thing that Steve Sarkisian did and prioritized. And we've seen now year after year after year, these guys that Sark has prioritized, and even guys that came in under Herman that were not looking to be NFL draft guys, right? We just saw this year, Alfred Collins, right? We saw Vernon Broughton. Those guys were not projected to be NFL draft guys 2 years ago. And now look at both of them getting drafted. One of them getting drafted way earlier than we thought he would. So there's something to be said about what is happening at Texas right now versus what we saw. And it's not really a contest versus the Charlie Strong and Tom Herman eras. I think we can just skip over those.
Yeah.
And but even under Mac Brown, right, the breadth of guys, the guys that were all across the board getting drafted, we haven't seen it like this. I think in modernity for sure.
No, 100%. And I left this name out. Christian Jones. I think Christian Jones is literally case sample number one of guys. I said on here, because it was my first year doing this after games, I said, this guy should never play offensive line for Texas. And that's how bad he was. I wasn't lying. He was that bad. And then all of a sudden, this guy becomes our best offensive lineman. And I'm like, oh, it's because we actually have coaches that know what the hell they're doing. So that right there is what made me a Sark believer.
Yeah, he has done a great job from the initial staff, right? I remember when they fired Tom Herman and hired hired Steve Sarkisian, I said to my buddy jokingly, if he could only bring Kyle Flood with him, everything would be better. Everything would be better. And I thought, I didn't think it was going to happen. I figured Alabama would pay him any amount of money they possibly could to get him to stay, and Texas was able to lure him away. So like, you cannot overstate. Like, and again, that first class, Bo Davis, great developer, great motivator, right? Like that first group of guys, and there were some misses, right? Texas has cycled a couple of times on the wide receivers coach. That's something that we have to, talk about. Blake Gideon had some issues, I think, both recruiting and developing. I think he's a young coach still trying to figure out, but obviously somebody likes what he's doing because he's moved on to bigger and better things. But the initial staff that Sark brought to campus did a lot of great work for them.
Will says Mark trash on Sark being hired. I did too. Like, when it came on, I didn't trash it. I said it was a C+ hire, but then with the coaching staff that came over with him, I said it moved to a B+ because his staff, he surrounded himself with very good football coaches. Like you said, Kyle Flood, Jeff Banks. That was like the last one, actually. They were fighting for like weeks, but Alabama and and Texas over Jeff Banks. Like, he probably got $200,000-300,000 extra dollars because they just kept going back and forth until he finally chose Texas. On top of that, they kept Stan Drayton, which is a really big keep at the time. Yeah. So that the staff is what made the difference for me. And I think Sark would tell you that too. I think the staff has helped him a lot, and he's retained the key pieces of that staff as well. Like, think about it. Pete Kwiatkowski, really big hire from Washington. We've been able to keep him. Kyle Flood, really big pickup from Alabama, been able to keep him. Jeff Banks from Alabama, been able to keep him. Those have been like the core guys that you've needed to keep. AJ Milwee, I'll throw in as well. So he's been able to retain the key guys as well. Now we've lost, like you said, a wide receiver coach here and there, running backs coach here and there, but the key guys he needs, he's kept.
Yeah, and Mark wasn't the only one trashing on the Sark hire. There were a lot of folks that were curious about. I had my reservations as well. He was an 8-win guy before his second year at Texas, right? That Sark had never hit the 10-win plateau. There were a lot of things, right? Was he really going to be able to sit in that chair with all of the things that happened in his past, right? All of those, like, Mark was not in a minority on not believing in Sark. I was cautiously optimistic because I'd seen what the offenses had done under Steve Sarkisian. I have a buddy who's both a Falcons fan and a Texas fan, and he was not a fan because of Sark in Atlanta. So like there people were all over the stinking board.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. That's the thing too. I didn't take as much into like the Washington and USC stints as other people did because he is an alcoholic, but he was dealing with like the peak of that during those times. So it's hard for me. There's nobody on the planet in that profession that can be a raging alcoholic and be successful. It's not possible. So for that to happen, I that's why I was kind of like, if that doesn't happen here, I think it'll be pretty good. That was my summary.
The Washington stint. Look at the year before he got there and the 2 years after. He did a pretty decent job. But we don't need to relitigate Steve Sarkisian's hire because I think it's worked out pretty well for Texas.